Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles and Leadership Series. My name is Daryl Lim. I serve as the H. Lady Montauk Chair in Law and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an unparalleled opportunity to glean insights from top leaders who serve in government, education, the private sector, and civil society. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journey and share skills, core values, and qualities that make them the leaders they are today. We're very pleased to welcome William Tong, the 25th Attorney General, to serve Connecticut. He first took office in 2019 and is currently serving his second term. General Tong is a national leader in many of the most consequential lawsuits and investigations in our country today, including bipartisan multi-state efforts to hold the addiction industry accountable for their role in the opioid crisis, to restore fair competition and prices in the generic drug industry, to hold social media giants accountable for the harms they may cause to kids and young people, to stop robocall scammers, and to ensure corporations safeguard our personal information from misuse and respect consumers' rights regarding the collection and use of their information. A father and the son of immigrant small business owners, General Tong is the oldest of 5 children and grew up working side by side with his immigrant parents in their family's Chinese restaurant. General Tong currently serves as Eastern Regional Chair and Finance Chair of the National Association of Attorney General. He also serves on the Executive Committee of the Democratic Attorneys General Association. General Tong previously practiced for 18 years as a litigator in both state and federal courts. He served for 12 years as a state representative in the Connecticut General Assembly, where he served as House Chairman of the Judiciary Committee as well as the Banking Committee. He is the first Asian American elected to statewide office in Connecticut and the first Chinese American to be elected Attorney General nationwide. In his quieter moments, General Tong likes to fly fish and tie flies, try all the great foods and restaurants across Connecticut, and is an amateur carpenter and cook.
Yeah.
Welcome, General Tong.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Great to be with you.
Let's start by just briefly telling us a little bit about your job and your typical day, if you have one.
There's no typical day. I'm the Associate Attorney General. I'll give you a flavor. So just last week, on Tuesday, I announced that we were joining the Federal Trade Commission, suing Amazon for violating our state and our federal antitrust laws. And then maybe Wednesday or Thursday, we got word that the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit agreed with Connecticut and remanded our case back to Connecticut State Court in our case against ExxonMobil and holding ExxonMobil accountable for its role in the climate crisis and for lying to Connecticut and the American people about climate change. So that gives you a flavor of what a normal week is like. Hardly a week goes by without something pretty significant happening. And it is a great diversity of issues. Obviously, going from Amazon to the climate is a big jump. And so it requires the office to be nimble and flexible and always sort of on a front footing to be ready for whatever comes our way. So, it's in that way, it's unpredictable and at times a little chaotic, but at the same time, it's an extraordinary honor to be the state's Attorney General.
Well, how do you pick up all these different industries and fields and issues, given that they are, by the time they reach you, they're at the highest level?
Yeah.
And you've got to make important decisions with deep subject matter expertise.
So, my job, I think, largely is to set the priorities of the office. And so, as an elected official, the people of our state of Connecticut are generally told continuously what my priorities are. And then, of course, there's a quadrennial exercise known as an election, in which every 4 years I tell them what my priorities are. And I think by and large, either people support what I'm doing and what my priorities are, or they don't. And if they don't, I don't get elected. And if they do, I think that confirms or informs what my priorities are going to be, because I reflect largely what the people of our state would like to focus on. When I got elected to my second term in November of last year, I was very clear that, as I was during the campaign, that one of the focuses of my work would be on the big technology companies and holding them accountable for harms to all of us and consumers for which they might play a role. And that wasn't sort of an unvarnished, limitless, I'm going to go after big tech priority, but really to say technology is important to all of us. It has enhanced and improved our lives in so many ways, but there are some real risks with technology. And one of the risks is that big technology companies, as they grow ever more dominant, leverage their power and their market power in a way that hurts competitors and hurts all of us as consumers. And then, of course, there's a great deal of concern nationally, including in Connecticut, about social media companies and big technology companies and their platforms in the ways in which they fail to protect us from harmful content and messaging that hurts people and puts them at risk, and particularly young people and young women, content that causes them to feel bad about themselves, to become depressed, to engage in self-harm or worse. So it's a give and take with the people of my state over what I'm going to focus on, but I think I'm fairly transparent about what I am going to focus on. And so in the overall structure of that, the rubric of all of the different things that I have articulated as being important, then the Associate Attorneys General and the Deputy Attorney General and the Assistant Attorneys General, they all organize their efforts around many of those priorities.
Thanks. How do you pick and choose between those priorities? Every time you say yes to something, you're going to say no to something else.
Well, yes and no. I think after 5 years in this office, I think my priorities choose me more than I choose them. I think maybe there's this misconception that I have this buffet of different really interesting issues, and that I get to say, well, I want to do that one, but I don't want to do that one because I don't have time for that one, or I don't really like that one, but this one suits me better. You know, when someone calls and says there's an attack on the Affordable Care Act and our nation's healthcare system, I don't really have the option to say I'm going to sit that one out. When there's a fight with one of our state's utilities over their efforts to increase rates on ratepayers by millions and millions of dollars, I can't say, well, I'm not really focused on that right now. I'm a little busy. I'm going to focus on some other issues. You know, in our child protection work or our public safety work, you know, when something happens in our state where somebody gets hurt, and the state is alleged to have played a role in that, I don't get to sit that out either. So, like I said, I think my priorities largely choose me. However, I think my job is to fit them all together and to make sure that resources are allocated in a sensible way and in an efficient way. And I guess maybe I don't choose the priorities. I choose how they get addressed and in what order.
Thank you. So I must say that you're the first person I know that's been sanctioned. And this is, of course, in connection with January 6 attacks, and you had come out, as other state attorney generals did, to condemn it, and you noted that you were targeted because you stepped up or stood up to Trump and the terrorists and traitors he established or he enabled when they essentially fought against the election results. And Russia then came up and imposed sanctions against you. Were you surprised?
Well, surprised that I rated highly enough for Vladimir Putin and his administration to sanction me. I would think, given the war and the free fall that their economy is in, they might have found something better to do with their time than to sanction the Attorney General of Connecticut. But as it is, I guess I can't go to Russia at this moment. I can't say that I'm proud, because I'm not proud of, as a country, how we have conducted ourselves in elections, and how poorly we have safeguarded and honored our democratic traditions and institutions. But I can think of no higher purpose for a state attorney general than to protect those institutions, and to do everything I can to safeguard our democracy. That the people that are going to hear this and watch this, there may be some that find that statement unremarkable or cliche or trite. I can only say that maybe you would know what it means if you were the son of immigrants like I am. My life is not possible anywhere else but in America. And I really believe that. For me to go from working side by side with my parents in our Chinese restaurant when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, to sitting here as the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, elected by the people of the state twice to serve as Attorney General, and to do that in one generation is remarkable indeed. And I'm not alone. There are many people who share that story in many different walks of life. You don't have to be an Attorney General to feel the truth and the beauty of the opportunities that this country gives us. And, I dare say, Daryl, that for you to be an esteemed law professor at Penn State Dickinson Law School in Pennsylvania, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, coming from Singapore and being educated in London, is also a reflection of the beauty of our country, that's possible. And I suspect that if I were still in my family's native China, that would not be the same, that I would not have the same opportunities. And that's not to disparage China or the people of that country. I just know that me doing what I do in the short period of time that I've been able to do it is likely impossible anywhere else. And so that's entirely due to our democratic institutions. It's entirely due to the ability of every citizen to vote. And if you so choose to run for office and offer yourself up for public service, and that anybody can really do it, anybody. And I'm living proof of that. And that's why I fought so hard to protect those institutions. We'll do that every single day, all day. Never apologize for that. And if Vladimir Putin has a problem with it, that's the deal.
Some people know you as the Trump Firewall. What does that mean to you?
I think that people in Connecticut, all people, but especially women, immigrants, children, have been particularly under attack by the former president and by the president and in his administration when Donald Trump was in office. And for much of my time as Attorney General, for all of my time as Attorney General, my job has been to be the firewall for people in our state, literally to build a legal structure that is a wall against all of these attacks. and to protect the people of our state and their fundamental rights and liberties. And whether that's a woman's right to choose, and her right to choose to have an abortion or not. The rights of immigrants to be treated like human beings, and were appropriate to have the opportunity to try to come here and build a life for themselves, like my family did, like my parents and grandparents did. The right of taxpayers in Connecticut to not be unfairly targeted by the Trump administration. And then I said children. There's so many ways in which children are prejudiced, from attempts to dismantle the federal Department of Education or deny much needed free and reduced lunch support at schools, to just the right of children to breathe clean air and drink clean water. All of those things have been profoundly under attack by the former president and his allies. And I don't think that's much in dispute. I think the president would say, I think not this president, I think Donald Trump would say, you're damn right that he did that because he thought that was a better version of America. And I could not disagree more.
So you and I first met in a casino. And I should say for the record that we were both there on official business. And you and your colleagues organized the Eastern Regional Meeting, and you picked the Mohegan Sun as the venue for the conference. Talk a bit about your engagement with stakeholders, and why was the choice of the Mohegan Sun significant?
Well, first of all, I always look for an opportunity to celebrate our state's businesses and industries and the beauty that is our state. And I wanted people to see Mystic, Connecticut, where we had dinner and people walked around and enjoyed Mystic that evening. And then Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods, which are the two casinos in Connecticut, I think two of the largest casinos in the world and two of the largest casinos in the Western Hemisphere, if not the two largest casinos in the Western Hemisphere. They're both hugely important to our economy, and they're near Mystic, and so it was a great place for us to be hosted and put up for a night or two. It's really important to get people together on a bipartisan basis to focus on our shared interest in antitrust enforcement, particularly as we're doing so much. We have bipartisan multi-state cases now against Google and against Amazon, announced just last week. Antitrust enforcement is core to what attorneys general do today. It's part of a firewall, not just against Trump, but a firewall for Connecticut families against huge companies and interests that may do harm to them. And that includes harm to consumers and charging them higher prices than they should have to pay in a free and transparent and fair market, and for reducing choices to consumers that they might otherwise have in a free, fair, and transparent market. So I wanted to get people together to talk about antitrust. You were part of that, Professor, in educating people about antitrust and artificial intelligence and the future of tech and antitrust and how those different roads intersect. And, largely as a result of not just that meeting, but many others like it, we're able to coordinate our work against the generic drug manufacturers, against Google, against Amazon, and others.
How do you make sure that you get the pulse of the people that you represent beyond the electioneering period? Do you go out, talk to folks? Do you have meet the people sessions? How does it work with you at the office?
Twice today, physically, I was with at the West Hartford Senior Center. I was with a group of students who were taught by local seniors English as a second language. So I spent time with the teachers and the students, so I get to hear their perspective on how they're doing and on their program and what they're learning. And then tonight I'll go speak before the YMCA in Westport, I'll be talking about a number of cases and initiatives, including my work on the opioid crisis. So I'm in front of people almost every single day, and they're not shy about telling me what's important to them, and I'm not shy about asking. And so, I think that politicians come in different shapes and sizes and inclinations and disinclinations. I tend to be more engaged, and I guess I like to jump in a crowd and body surf, right? And get to know people and understand what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, how I can help them. And I just draw my energy from the people that I see every single day.
So you talk about the opioid crisis. It's something which Attorney General Merrick Garland actually spoke about in an interview this weekend. And it seems like the problem is intractable. From where you're sitting, where you stand, have we made progress? And is there light at the end of the tunnel?
We've made a ton of progress in that when I became Attorney General, we had not held any bad actors accountable. And now, 5 years later, we've held many, many bad actors accountable and extracted more than $50 billion from the opioid addiction industry, which will go largely to fund treatment and prevention in addiction science. That's progress. At the same time, people are still dying. And at the same time, states suffer untold economic damage from this crisis. In Connecticut, it's upwards of 1,500 people a year. That's 1,500 families that are wrecked by this crisis, and $10 billion a year more in economic damage, estimated by economists. Multiply that by 50 states and then territories in the district, and states that are much bigger than we are, and the toll is enormous. And it's not going anywhere. It is the worst public health crisis in America. There's no cure. People have to fight through and wrestle with their addiction every single day. And anybody in this space knows it's not just about getting people into recovery, it's keeping them there. And so many people go into recovery, they're doing well for a while, then they fall out of recovery, they go back into recovery, they fall out of recovery, and sometimes we lose them. And it is this pattern that repeats itself in countless families in communities across the country that makes it intractable. But if you ask me, we have no choice but to fight this battle. You asked earlier about choosing priorities. There's no choosing this one. It is a priority. It has to be. And we have to throw everything we have at it, and we have.
People talk about the new federalism and how, because Congress seems to be dysfunctional in many ways, a lot of what the federal government used to do is now on state governments. Is this, do you think, the new normal? And is this where we're going to be for the foreseeable future?
It's either the new normal or it's a function of the system and what the founders. And so I'm going to disagree a little bit with what you said a second ago, in that I don't know that states, well, maybe in a specific instance, states might do something the federal government used to do. But that suggests that there are powers of the federal government that the states are exercising that are properly the province of the federal government. And I guess I would disagree only insofar as there's nothing new about federalism. Federalism is the basic building block of our federal system and of our nation. And I say that carefully because when I say our nation, I mean our federation. And I often have to remind people that we are a federation of 50 sovereign states joined together by our consent. We fought a civil war over this, and that we have delegated limited powers to the federal government to act on our behalf when it makes more sense by our federal charter for the federal government to take on those responsibilities, because on a state-by-state basis, it's not sensible or practical to do that. So like foreign relations, for example, or national security and immigration. Now, over time, I think states have delegated more and more authority to the federal government, and maybe over time, we came to expect the federal government, given that authority, to make good decisions and pass laws to protect people in our country. And when they are not able to do so, it seems only natural that by design, that responsibility devolves back to the states. So I think in that way, the states never abdicated that authority. The states always retained that authority. The federal government might have acted on our behalf, but when it doesn't, we retain the prerogative and the sovereign right to act.
I'm going to invite you to step back for a moment and reflect on your time as AG. Talk about some of the leadership lessons you have learned, if anything surprised you, and what keeps you going.
Well, let's talk about what surprises me. I think there's a temptation for people to neatly divide people, individuals, and leaders into executives and non-executives, or in government, executives, legislators, and judges, right? The three branches, and that somehow we're all distinct from one another. We have vastly different skills, and you'll hear about this person or that person as a matter of criticism. They're not executive, or they would never survive as a legislator. I was trained as a legislator, and when I say that, I mean because I was legislator first. I was in the state legislature for 12 years, and for 8 years in the leadership as a chairman of 2 major committees. And so you could say that I'm a legislator, but now I'm an executive. And I'll tell you a quick story that demonstrates what I mean. When I first became Attorney General, we had a meeting in Washington, D.C. Of the National Association of Attorneys General, and it's a fairly officious setup. We sit in a horseshoe, and there are a bunch of flags arrayed around us, or state flags behind us, and I was sitting next to California because Connecticut sits next to California, and in alphabetical order. And I discovered soon after the meeting started that my colleagues were not getting along terribly well, and they were fighting amongst themselves. And I turned to Attorney General Becerra, who is in California. And he was a member of Congress before he became Attorney General. Now he's the Secretary of Health and Human Services. But he was a member of Congress. And so our colleagues were fighting. And I said to General Becerra, man, I thought I left the legislature. And he said, it's the same shit, man. It's the same shit. And it was so funny because I realized then that even though I was an executive now, that in order to do my job, I had to draw on my legislative skills. I had to be able to build coalitions and help to lead a group of 56 states, territories, in a district, a group of 56 executives who were all independently empowered by their home states to act on their state's behalf or territories of the district. And they don't work for me and I don't work for them. But much like in the legislature, you need each other. And I draw on those legislative skills every single day as an example. So that's been an important lesson. And so as we're talking about profiles of leadership, nobody should ever put themselves in one box or another. I think that's lesson number one from my experience. Lesson number two is never to think that you don't need the skills that are required in the other box. I think you find some executives, for example, I see this a lot with school superintendents. They say, oh, that person is brilliant. They're just not a good politician. Well, then you can't be a school superintendent. I can't think of a job that requires more political skills and diplomacy than being a superintendent of schools, especially in a major city. And the same is true about governors and about legislators, about deans of law schools. If you're not a political person, meaning you can't build coalitions, you can't set an agenda and execute it, you can't bring other people in and convince them to support your agenda. If you can't do all of that political work, you won't be successful.
So in order to be Attorney General, you have to run for office, you get elected. How does that work with the governor? Is the governor, in a way, your peer? Would the governor be your superior? How would that reporting structure or power structure work?
The governor, the governor obviously, because of his station and the scope of his authority, is the leader of the state. And so, by definition, is not my peer. He is superior in his authority and powers, and the trust vested in him by the people of the state by the Constitution. He is not, however, my superior in actual and technical terms. What do I mean by that? I'm an independently elected constitutional officer. And Senator Blumenthal is our senior United States Senator, Richard Blumenthal. But Senator Blumenthal was Attorney General for 20 years. And for those 20 years, Senator Blumenthal never had a governor, never served with a governor of the same party. So, there is that added complication where they didn't even agree politically on many issues. But Senator Blumenthal had to find a way to work with the governor because the governor is his client. As a state's lawyer, the governor is my client, Democrat or Republican. Now, I've only served under Democratic governors, but that could change, I suppose, at some point. And so it's a dance where, yeah, he's higher, but he's not my boss. And yet I need the governor needs me, right? And I have a duty to serve him, and he controls my budget. And so it's a dance. It's like being a tenured and chaired professor at a university. I guess you don't need the dean, right? But you do.
Interesting analogy.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about your management style. You manage a large office, lots of people reporting directly, indirectly to you. How do you get a sense of what's going on at the office and people's performance and so on?
Yeah, we have a structure for the formal structure of management, of supervision, of performance evaluation. And so in many ways, we look a lot like a modern workplace where all of those structures are in place. I meet regularly with assistant attorneys general and associate attorneys general. We have various meetings, regular meetings that give me a direct understanding of what is happening on the ground. I'll give you an example. We have once a week, we have a meeting to talk about the big cases in the office that require my attention. I have a regular meeting with various unions that are represented here and organized here in my office. I have a regular meeting with my executive staff that happened at 11 a.m. this morning. Oh, and I meet with my senior team every day at 10 a.m. So that brings us closer together. And it reminds me, I have to make a note about something I got to do later. That brings us closer together and gives me a good sense of where people are at.
Every day at 10 a.m.
Every day at 10 a.m.
How do you make those meetings efficient if they're going to take place daily?
At this point, they're fairly routine and everybody knows what to expect. And there are a couple of key items we address every day, but it's basically what's going on, what's important today and this week, what should everybody know about that's happening, and we go on with our day.
Is it a reporting up? Everybody's reporting what they're doing to you and instead of just taking stock, or is it more of a conversation?
That would be inefficient. So it's not quite that rigorous. It's really an opportunity for people to check in with each other for 20 minutes and say whatever needs to be said. So there's no obligation that somebody give a report. But there's no shortage of things that people need to say.
Are people afraid of you at the office?
No, I don't think so.
Let's talk about your experience with wins and losses. You ran for elections, you've won a few, you've lost a couple. And both are important for leadership lessons. So if you would reflect on them both as a state representative where you won, and your 2012 Senate campaign and 2013 campaign for mayor of Sanford.
There's lots to say on that subject. We could have started that 40 minutes ago and spent the whole time talking about wins and losses. When I ran for mayor of Stanford in 2013 and lost a race that I was not supposed to lose, it was devastating. And someone I know, Joe McGee, who's a long time and seasoned leader and executive, various roles. He said to me, politics is all about how you get up off the canvas. And for people that don't know what that analogy means, it's a boxing analogy. So when you get knocked down, hopefully not knocked out, you're on the canvas. And you have to get up before the count of 10. And I've been knocked on my ass more than once, and I've had to get up. And almost every major figure in American politics has lost. Not everybody, but most. President Clinton lost. President Obama lost. President Biden has lost many times. This may have been his third or fourth run for the presidency. It does something to you in terms of acquiring the strength to get up off the canvas, focus yourself again, and fight another day. And until you've been there, you don't know how hard it is. Because, and I suspect this is true about not political leadership and about non-elected leadership, leadership is very personal. But, and what I mean by that is how you do and how people regard you is a referendum at all times on you as a person. And as an elected person, that is constantly true or always true. Whether people support you or not, whether they vote for you or not, is sort of a function of whether they agree with you and your policies. I guess that's sort of the table stakes. They wouldn't even consider you if you didn't generally articulate or embody the views that they themselves have. But beyond that point of entry, most people like you or they don't like you because of how they feel about you. And that's very personal, right? It's basically a referendum on whether they think you're a good person or not. And so it's hard when you get rejected by people, and it stays with you. What I would say is that I am the cumulative sum of those wins and losses. My Senate race in 2011, 2012 was considered then to be sort of a crazy thing to do. I was a, young state legislator, maybe wasn't best positioned to be a United States Senator. But I will tell you, there's no attorney general if I hadn't run for the US Senate. There's no way that Chinese American son of immigrants enters the race for attorney general as a frontrunner and finishes as the winner if I had not gone through the exercise of introducing myself to people across Connecticut in that Senate race, even though it was unsuccessful. They got to know me and they said, not now, William, but next time. And it was painful. I'm not sure I really would want to do that again, but it was essential.
Why do you choose a career path in which you constantly have to be subject to that kind of personal scrutiny, whether in the legislature or attorney general, or I suspect the next career choice and the one after that?
Well, I often get asked that question, and I often hear from people that say that they could never do what I do. And I kind of reject that. Everybody is subject to scrutiny in their jobs. Let me amend that. Well, that's generally true, but let me amend that by saying anybody who aspires to leadership in any pursuit is subject to scrutiny and criticism and judgment and second guessing, and a fair bit of heartache and failure and success and politics and the bad side of it come out, the connivance, the backstabbing, the duplicity, the unfairnesses, the people saying things that aren't true. All of that happens. I suspect, no offense, Penn State, Dickinson Law School, it happens in the faculty. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not trying to insult people. I think if you just think about it, of course that's true, right? And I remember a doctor, a good friend of mine, here in Connecticut, who said, William, I don't know how you deal with, all the public facing, work with constituents and voters and other elected officials and all the backstabbing and all the backroom deals and all the, connivances and the people that tell you things and do another and all of that. I said, doctor, and he said, it's so political. I could never work in an environment like that. I said, doctor, you consider yourself to be a scientist? And he said, yes, doctor, I'm a scientist. I said, you work in a hospital? He said, yes, I'm a hospitalist. I said, and you're like a senior administrator in the hospital? Yes. Yeah. I can't think of a more political place in America than a hospital. You think we have it bad in the legislature. Try to become a department head or, a senior administrator in a hospital. It's just the same forces are at work. You just call them different things, or you just don't recognize them in the same way that I do. But my job, for example, if I had chosen a different route and I had stayed at my New York City law firm instead of going to public service and had tried to become a partner there. That's intensely political. And getting clients and getting work and being compensated for what you think you ought to be compensated for. I mean, I'd be in the same place, in the same position, be fighting the same battles.
That's an interesting perspective, one I've not heard before. Thank you for sharing that.
I hope I think if people are honest with themselves, again, not to make too close to home, but one of the challenges in higher education for PhD students is it's so hard to get a professorship anywhere, and it's so hard to get tenure, and that's a real disincentive to people going into academia and bench science after they get their PhDs and they go into industry, because good luck becoming a professor. And that's an intensely political process. And it's just really, becoming a tenured professor and becoming a leader at a law firm or a corporation and getting to that place, you may not think of it that way, but it's a campaign.
Talk about being Asian and being elected office. You have now been both for most of your professional life. How is it like at the beginning, and has it changed since?
I think that there's more awareness of Asian Americans and our community and the challenges that we face. We are not quite as invisible as we once were. And I think you and I having this conversation is proof of that. You don't need Shang-Chi to prove that, that you're a professor at your law school and I'm in my role. That's not true 30 years ago. And I think just by being and serving and being in front of people has made an impact. But I think it's fair to say that much of what was true 30 years ago is still true, which is Asian Americans are still largely invisible in the American political system. And we are not seen as appropriate fits for many of these roles. And people don't see us in these roles. I think a lot of people don't see Asian Americans as attorneys general or senators or governors. And it's because they haven't seen one before many times. But because race, and to a certain extent racism, and to a certain extent anti-immigration sentiment plays a role in all of that. And that's always there. Look at my Twitter feed. There's hardly a day that goes by that I'm not accused of being an agent for the Chinese Communist Party or some other nonsense like that. And
even when you go after TikTok.
Yeah, I tell people, right, exactly. Whenever I read a news report or a public official, including Democrats, who go after China and go after TikTok because it's a Chinese company, and talk about foreign policy, national security issues about China, it is always infused with a heavy dose of xenophobia and racism, even if we have to have the conversation. I get that we do. I'm not saying we don't, but understand that for Chinese Americans, it's an indictment, whether you intend to or not. And that's real. And what's hard is that I was born in Hartford Hospital, a mile or two from here. I'm an American, Jack. I'm as American as anybody else. And getting people not to see us as perpetual foreigners will be a lifelong struggle.
Do you think there's a glass ceiling for Asian Americans?
They call it the bamboo ceiling. Um, yes. However, these ceilings are meant to be broken, and they are in many ways artificial and self-imposed. And Asian Americans, I think, we are limited by these glass ceilings that are arbitrarily imposed upon us. We also can choose to accept them or not. And I think many Asian Americans struggle with that. They struggle with getting out of their own way and putting themselves out there. And I am indulging stereotypes because we indulge them ourselves. You know, this idea that we're quiet or meek, or that we don't rock the boat and we don't prefer leadership and we're communitarian and all of those things. And if you're a woman, that you're subservient or exotic or worse. You know, those are limitations put on us by other people. Sometimes I think we indulge them too. And Asian Americans have to stop doing that and have to stop using these excuses to take ourselves out of difficult situations.
I want to spend the last few minutes that we have just talking about how you find balance. And as I mentioned in my introduction, you fly fish. What is Thai flies, by the way?
So flies are literally artificial fishing lures made to look like insects. And so you use yarn, use thread, and various materials like animal fur to tie an insect, a fly. And there are many different flies, and many people just buy flies from the Orvis store, or from L.L. Bean, or from your local fly shop. I'm sure there's one in or around Carlisle, because there's quite a robust fly fishing community in Pennsylvania.
Another reason for you to come.
Yeah, right. But many people tie their own flies, and I tie my own flies. I do buy flies too. Let me answer your question about balance, because I get this a lot. I think the first thing to understand about balance is there is no balance. That's my view. It's not like I can say 50% of my life is for my family and my children, and 50% is for work. And I closely and strictly monitor those boundaries. That's nonsense, I think. If you accept that there isn't balance, then the only way to meet your obligations and priorities is to make them a priority. So, I'll give you an example. My wife is traveling this week, and I made it a priority last night to have dinner with my son at our favorite local Chinese restaurant takeout joint. And we did that instead of work or instead of recreation. There's no shortage of, I could spend 15 hours a day on work, no problem. I could easily fill my calendar with events and commitments and not leave any time to breathe. And I don't do that because my son is a priority. My girls are a priority. Last week, I took Eleanor to see a college, university, and then I went to visit them at boarding school where they go to school. And I took time away from I was in Massachusetts and took time away from my job during the week because that's my priority. Excuse me. And I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, but so my message on balance is don't try to achieve some artifice that there is a balance. Just know what your priorities are, know what's important to you, and if you stick with those and work everything else around those priorities, I think that's how you find. I think that's how you will find what works for you.
Thanks, General Tong, and conclude in saying, may you reach and break more bamboo ceilings for the community.
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope to do this in person the next time I'll come out and visit you.